We're going to start with first like a 5-minute presentation from Inclusion Done Right by Ilene Carver, and then we're going to move right into Pamela's presentation. So let's start with Ilene. Come on down.
Hi, good evening. This fall, the Boston Teachers Union has launched a campaign we call Inclusion Done Right. We started by bringing together educators from across the district in order to advocate for the services our students deserve. We're reaching out to parents and families because we know you are our most important allies. We know that many families are also feeling that not all the needs of their children are being met as well. We want to partner with you because we know that when we put our voices together, that's what makes us the strongest. The next meeting of our Inclusion Done Right campaign is on Tuesday, November 19th in the late afternoon. There are flyers on the table in both one side English, one side Spanish, and we invite you to join us. If you sign the flyer tonight and give us your email, then we will add you to our email list and we'll remind you about the meeting and also let you know about other activities and events that we're involved in. I also want to mention one of the things that we've been doing this in the early fall has been circulating a survey to teachers. We've gotten hundreds of teachers to fill out a survey describing their experiences in inclusion special education classrooms. They're letting us know what's working, what's challenging, and what they believe they need in order to be able to meet the needs of every child in their classroom and in their school. On the tables here, besides the inclusion flyer, is also a parent version of the survey. We invite you, it will be online at SpEdPAC by next week, but we invite you tonight, if you'd like to fill it out by hand, and I'll pick it up at the end of the meeting. Finally, one more thing that we're doing is holding inclusion awareness events at schools across the district where educators and parents are coming together to talk about inclusion experiences. If that's something you'd like to see happen at your school, you can also let me know or indicate that on the flyer. I'm going to just quickly introduce to you Jessica Burns, who is a parent at the Lee School who inadvertently came to our first Inclusion Done Right meeting, which we were very happy about, because she saw a flyer at the school where her child attends. This next meeting in November, we are eagerly inviting parents from across the district again to join with us so that together we can advocate for all the services we need for the children in our classrooms and schools. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Burns. I'm really happy to be here. We're new to Boston. My son and I moved here from Connecticut last year, and I need to get connected to the special needs community. So whenever I have a few minutes, I get nervous and I want to sum it up as best I can. Coming from Connecticut, I have a background in special education. My son has autism. And coming from Connecticut to Boston, the transition has been really difficult. And last year, initially, my anger was directed at the school staff for not providing my son Ryan what he needs, and his school day sort of fell apart after moving here from Connecticut, and getting involved in this Inclusion Done Right campaign has helped me realize that my anger was misdirected at the staff, when really what I need to be doing is advocating for that staff to have the support they need so that my son can then get what he needs. You know, the Inclusion Done Right campaign is essentially asking the district to provide a special education and general ed teacher with a paraprofessional in each classroom. And just to give you guys a reference, in Connecticut, my son was in a general ed classroom with a one-to-one paraprofessional, which was generally the way things were done there with special ed kids. So we were included, we were invited to birthday parties, Ryan was included in field day, he was included in field trips. It was just a very different experience than here, feeling so secluded and segregated from the rest of the population. And so when I went to the campaign, and they said, you know, we're asking for a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, and a para. I'm like, at the very minimum, that's what the staff should have. Having worked as a para, I can't imagine that with only 2 hands and 2 feet, I can take care of maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 children at once, best. So, you know, I don't really know what else to say other than please come. You know, I met a lot of great staff at the meeting, and we need parents. We need parent involvement, we need parents to speak up, and I think that, you know, a lot of you probably relate with being frustrated with your child's school. We need parents who want to address the administration and the district rather than the teacher who forgot to, you know, send home whatever or write home whatever, because that teacher is drowning in work. So, thank you for your time.
Excuse me. Pamela, do you need water? Do you need water?
So our next speaker is Pamela from the Disability Law Center, who every time I say her name, the response is the same. Oh, you're gonna love her, she's just amazing, she's amazing. So I gotta set you up early, I do, Pamela, I do. Because that's the standard response I get. So Pamela's gonna be weaving a lot of information. You should have the PowerPoints there. And if you don't have this one, I went downstairs to grab some additional copies so we can get this passed out to you. But Pamela, come on up and just be your awesome self. Oh, no, no.
You're not gonna video me, right?
Well, we have the closed caption.
You do?
Yeah, because it's on the YouTube, it's closed caption.
All right. Good evening. I need you guys to make a deal with me because I'm told that we have to go out of here at 8:30. If I don't get to your question, I need you to call me directly. And I'm gonna give you a line if you can take it. The number on here is the office number, but my direct line is 617-723-8455, extension 134. And there's only one person in the whole law center who looks like me, so you just do that. How do I switch slides?
I'm doing it for you.
Oh man, I'm gonna do that.
You're all set. You're all set.
Who here has been to an IEP meeting? And who here has been to an IEP meeting and been ticked off? Oh, wow. Have any of you been to a BSEA hearing? Okay, a couple of you have.
What is that?
That is the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. And before I put you to sleep, the most important thing I want to say is that the team meeting is not the Supreme Court, all right? So if things don't go well at the team meeting, you've got a whole bunch of steps that you can take after that to try to work things out, and we're going to talk about what that is. So that's basically what I'm going to go through. I'm not going to read that to you, but that is a general overview of what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to do my very best to get through all of this so I can take questions at the end. Can I have the next one? This is a list of handouts that I've given you. The letters that we've done as samples are just to get you started because we want to underscore that when something doesn't go right, you have to write, okay, and write to the school. I am not a big fan of email. As I stand here talking to you, I think when I left my office, I had 4,493 unopened emails because I just can't get to them all right? But my letters I will read and I answer my phone. So it's really important that you hang on to those sample letters, and we're going to go through all of those forms as I chat with you.
That'll be my shirt.
Okay, who is eligible for special education services? There are a couple of pieces to this, and the first is that your child has a disability, and the disabilities are listed very specifically in the special education regulation. I hear a lot of people telling me that someone has told them that ADHD is not a covered disability. Has anybody here heard that? Yeah, okay, that's not true, okay? And I want to dispel that notion right away. But it's not enough that somebody has a disability. The person has to be shown not to make effective progress through the curriculum. And this is where it sometimes gets tricky and some people get thrown off the rails, because not making effective progress is not just about grades. All right, there are kids on the autism spectrum who, quite frankly, with due respect to the teachers, are smarter than the teachers, all right? But they've got social and emotional issues that get in the way of their making effective progress. And it's right in the text of the regulation that effective progress means social and emotional components. So if your kid is at recess all day long and not playing with anybody, or arguing with people, or just not really connecting, or doesn't know how to make eye contact in a conversation. These are all things that are considered pieces of social and emotional progress. It's not about grades. We have had lots of clients over the years who are on IEPs who are getting straight A's throughout. They couldn't get a B if you paid them, okay? But they're still having trouble connecting in school, all right?
Pamela, before you continue, I just want to make a quick announcement. Our Spanish interpreter is here, Julia's here. So if there's anyone that needs a Spanish interpreter, she is available and right here.
Could you hold your hand up, please, because I tend to talk too fast. And if I start babbling, if you'll just plug on your ear or something and let me know. Okay, hi, my name is Pamela. Yeah. Okay, so that's that. Be aware, once again, that the statute lists all of the disabilities. They're right there. So if you see it in the statute, it's covered, all right? And also be aware that effective progress means social and emotional and not just academics. Those are the disability categories. Boy, you're right on this. Those are the disability categories that are listed in the statute. And each one of those, as you can imagine, has subparts. But that gives you a general idea. It's physical stuff, and it's intellectual limitations, and it's communication limitations. It covers a whole variety of disabilities.
Quick question, can you elaborate in the specific learning disability? There's about 11 categories under that umbrella, but most of the time they do not specify what exactly on those LD.
Okay, I want you to say that again, please, just a little louder so the people in the back can hear
Okay.
you.
I
And
said,
so I
if you
can
can
hear you.
elaborate a little bit more about the specific learning disability, for instance, like kids with dyslexic, so it's hard for them to just find it to make sure that they have a disability. And some of the time, they will be able to say, no, that's not part of it, or it's something else.
Okay. The question, if,
What, under that umbrella, what exactly that specifies?
it covers all kinds of things. It covers dyslexia, it covers,
Because a lot of
communi-
parents don't know that, because they do not say it specifically in the IEP, they just put SLD.
okay,
And that
can
is-
we, go back to that slide so that I can? Okay, if someone has dyslexia, that can probably qualify as a specific learning disability. To get put on an IEP to begin with, there has to be an evaluation. And anybody who evaluates a child and says this child is dyslexic has completed the first step, all right? That's a disability. The next question is it getting in the way of progress? And if the child can't read, that meets the two-part test. Or if the child isn't reading on grade level, or if the child is so frightened of reading because it's just too hard and won't read, okay, that could conceivably qualify. So anybody who evaluates a child and identifies something like dyslexia has done your work for you, all right? Because that person is gonna come to the team meeting and say, this is a disability. And I see you smiling. A lot of you are gonna say, I can't get my evaluator to come to the team meeting because the evaluator has to be paid or the evaluator is too busy. The solution to that is to write to the school and to say, I have an evaluator who wants to elaborate on this evaluation. We need a speakerphone. I don't like doing this, and I'll tell you why I don't like this, but I have used this at team meetings when I have somebody who can't be there. We put this bad boy on speaker and we're off at the races, all right? Because the important thing to remember is that you want the participation of someone other than you who's an expert. There is nobody that I know of, and I'm gonna get to this later on about what goes wrong at the team meeting, but there's nobody I know of who's gonna argue that dyslexia is not a disability. If somebody at the team meeting is telling you that, the appropriate thing is to smile at them radiantly, tell them to have a nice day, and to leave, okay? And to consider going to the next level. I had my 18th year at the Disability Law Center last week. I almost always lose at a team meeting because it's not a courtroom, okay? There isn't any third party there to arbitrate disputes, all right? It's between me with my 4'10" and 3/4" self and a bunch of people in the school, all right? And if I think I'm right, there's no point in my standing there or sitting there in my nice little suit and trying to duke it out with everybody. I go to the next level, which we're gonna talk about, all right? So you're gonna win that battle. If that's the only thing you have to fight, then I can go home.
I'm just
Okay.
saying because there's so many other parents who's going to certain things and they don't know what's under that SLT. There's so many
What's the
different,
subcategory of each one?
right, there's different categories of that. So some of the parents, especially the immigrant families, when they coming in, they have no idea what is that mean.
I understand, but the whole point of a team is just like
Yeah.
you don't play baseball without a shortstop, all right? Somebody had to diagnose that particular disability, all
Especially
right?
now they have
It's not
focus
enough for
on
you
the
as a
screen.
mother to come in and say, my son is dyslexic. You have to have an evaluation, and the evaluation is gonna do that work for you if it's done properly. Okay, can I have the next? Okay. I wanna underscore again that effective progress is two pieces, all right? It's not just academic, it's social and emotional. So if your kid is acting out in school, having temper tantrums, not sitting down and concentrating, you need to think about requesting an evaluation to see what's going on, all right? Because that's probably related to a disability, and if the disability is interfering with effective progress, that qualifies your child for an IEP. Okay, the first step to get your child in on an IEP is to request an evaluation. And that's your handout B. And I skipped over A because it's obvious that you write a letter and you say, please evaluate my child for special education services. This is a sample, it's not the Bible, but it's a good way to start you off to just say, I want my child evaluated. Always, always do this in writing. The law changed. It used to be that you could see somebody in the hallway and say, please evaluate my daughter. Can't do that anymore. You need to write a letter, but this is not a time to try to be Toni Morrison or Shakespeare. You just get it down here and say, I want my child evaluated. Then you use this form. And I'm not in love with this form because it's a little slick, but what is important is that the standard evaluations are at the top. They're boilerplate. Those are the ones that the school will do. But you have a right on the bottom half of this form to ask for any additional evaluation. An assistive technology evaluation to see if your child can speak through a machine, an occupational therapy evaluation, a speech language evaluation, any other eval that you can think of, all right? This form doesn't do you any good until the school receives it. The clock about when they respond starts running when the school receives it, not when you send it. So I like to tell people to send it by certified mail. I think 1 out of 50 people listens to me, but when I have to do my own business, that's what I do, because then I'm done, all right? And there's no question about whether anybody received it. If you don't want to do that, you need to call the school and ask them who chairs the special education team meetings, and you write to that person. So even if that person is on vacation or has gone away or doesn't work there anymore, you've at least got the category of person to whom this form should go. And you should get a response. Yeah, I got you, ma'am. You should get a response. Once they do an evaluation, the team must meet. They cannot call you on the phone and say no. There has to be a meeting. Ma'am?
Does it have to be in the special education plan, or can you like have it timestamped and put into the like the secretary's hand?
The question was, does it have to go to the SpEd director, or
Or
can you
just
hand
make-
deliver it and have it
deliver
hand
it to the
stamped?
secretary and then stamp and copy, like?
You
your
can
copy?
deliver it to a secretary and have it time-stamped. My problem is, nobody I know who's ever done that can come back and tell me the name of that secretary if something goes wrong. And there's no way to know that that secretary sends it where she's supposed to. And you eliminate a step when you take it right to the source. I think your suggestion is perfectly fine. But the idea here is to simplify it so that the ball is always in their court and not in yours. And if I sound like I'm down on schools or like I'm trying to make this out to be a war, I'm not. I'm just saying that they're very busy, they're very underfunded. Your child is not the only child in the building, and the most efficient way to get it done is to get this to the person who you know is going to be part of the special ed team. And no school in the country is going to hide that person's name from you. Ma'am, nice and loudly.
So, my question is, how do you know which district you're supposed to, like, my son goes to a private school. How do I figure out what district or what school would be in public, if you went to a public school? Or do I go straight to the special ed department? Like, how do I figure that out? It's not the private school, it's going to do the evaluation. It's Boston, correct?
Yeah. Where you live, I have you, ma'am. Where you live, I'm sorry?
We can answer that if you need us.
They're both
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're.
Take it away. What's your name and where are you affiliated?
You're living in Boston and you're just looking for your child to be evaluated. You can go right to one of the welcome centers to register your student and say that you're looking to have an evaluation only. If your child is attending a school, let's say Hope John Paul or something like that, another school outside of Boston Public School.
Thank you. What's your name, ma'am?
Jen Sweeney.
Hey. Okay, my colleagues always laugh at me because I'm very visual, so I hope you won't laugh at me too, but it is important, well, you can laugh, all right. It is important to know that you can write in an additional evaluation other than the ones that are printed at the top. If your child stutters, or if your child has ADHD, that's not automatically covered here. Your child might need a neuropsych, your child might not speak and might need a speech language, and that's not automatically covered here. You can write in any evaluation that you want, all right? You want to sign it and date it and keep a copy. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with who take this form and do it properly and send it, and they never see the form again, and they don't have a duplicate at home, and if for whatever reason they've given it to that secretary and she misfiles it, all right, they can't prove that they've sent it, all right? And you save yourself hundreds of years of hassle by just making it sure that you keep a copy of everything that you send. Next one, please. All right, the team meeting, and most of you have been to one, and some of you have been to one that you didn't like, okay? The team meeting by law has to have all of those people, all right? In addition, you have a legal right to bring anyone with you according to the regulation who has unique knowledge of the child. And that can be the babysitter, okay? That can be a relative, it can be you, it can be any physician or clinician who works with your child. And I strongly emphasize your right to get a speakerphone at that meeting if somebody has something to contribute, but for whatever reason they can't show up. All right, the school is not going to deny that, or if the school does deny that, you need to write to the school and say, we're not going to meet until you accommodate my right to bring somebody who has unique knowledge of my child. One of the things that I don't like is that a lot of times people have a really good evaluation, but the evaluator isn't there, and somebody on the school side of the table will interpret the results. And they're not dishonest, but they're just not the person who did the eval. So you want to make every effort that you can to get your team together. I've been to, I got you, ma'am. I've been to meetings where they end early, okay, or where they say that they can't stay for the full time to get something taken care of. And you need to write a follow-up letter and remind them that you had something else that needed to be handled and you need them to meet again. I've been to meetings where a key person isn't there. You're saying that your child has a speech-language problem, but for whatever reason, the speech-language person is in Cancun, all right, and not able to participate in the meeting. And you have a right to say, I either want to adjourn, okay, or we need to have an additional meeting when this person is available because this person is critical. Once again, this is not a courtroom. This is a meeting where everybody is supposed to get together and decide on the best services for your child. And you have a right to advocate for the person who's going to help that process. Ma'am.
If you have an evaluation from the district, can you ask for the person that did the evaluation to be at your meeting? Like, is there any, you can't, how do you get that person to your meeting?
You can't force them to come, but if you feel that the evaluation is helpful and they're going to give you what you want, it doesn't matter. If you don't feel that the conclusion at the meeting is what you want, and the person who did the evaluation is not there, my own suggestion is that you ask for the meeting to be adjourned, or you just take it to the next level if you have to, all right? Because you want to be in a position, cross-examine is the wrong word, and I'm sort of trying to find another one, but you want to be in a position where you challenge somebody's findings, and if they're not there, okay, you want to make sure that there's somebody at that meeting who is qualified to handle that particular evaluation. There is no law that says that if they tell you that you're going to meet at Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning, that's chiseled in granite like somebody's wedding day or something. I mean, you can get the doggone thing rescheduled so that everybody who needs to be there is there. But I strongly suggest that when you have these concerns, you put them in writing, all right? You need to pretend that your telephone doesn't work in the special ed arena. You need to document certain things, because if you go upstairs to a next level, you want to be able to show somebody who wasn't there, okay, that you made an attempt to work within this process. And you can't do that by trying to recreate a telephone call. Okay. This is important, and once again, this is something where you can't blindside a school, okay? You need to let them know in advance. Most of the special ed forms online are translated into 14 languages, but the law says very clearly that you have a right to participate in a team meeting effectively, and you can't do that, all right, if the meeting is not in your mother tongue. I started taking French from the time I was 9 years old. I would no more go to a team meeting and try to navigate in French than I would try to fly an airplane. I mean, it's just too complicated, all right? And you need to give the school a heads up. most schools have somebody available who can translate in some of the more common languages, but if the school can't find an interpreter for you, you need to ask to have the meeting postponed, okay, until they do. It's as simple as that. It is their legal obligation to do that. They're not doing you a favor, they're not being nice. It is a legal obligation. The same thing is true with documents, all right? You need to get them to write to you in the language that is convenient and comfortable for you. And if they start sending you documents in English, you need to write back to them, have somebody write a letter for you and say, this document needs to be translated into Spanish. You are not the only person in the whole school who speaks another language, and this is something that schools have to adapt to. Okay, if the team says no, this is the form that you're gonna get, and it's in your handout. And they should tell you that there's a finding of no eligibility, and they should just let you know that that's what the conclusion is, and then you need to write back and ask them whether you want to take this to the next level, which we're going to talk about in a minute or so. Okay, this is underutilized, and this is a very, very good thing to know about. If the school does an evaluation and you disagree with the evaluation, you think that your child needs speech-language services and the school says no, your daughter does not need speech-language services, you have a legal right to ask for an independent educational evaluation. If you meet certain income guidelines, the school has to do this for free, all right? And you're entitled to that. They give you a list of people who will accept a certain rate, and you get to pick one of those people, and the person is not supposed to be affiliated with the school. People do not use this often enough, and this is what I'm saying about being at a team meeting and bumping heads when you've reached an impasse, all right? You don't bother with that, all right? You ask for another evaluation. Now, the school has a right in some instances to say no. However, if your child qualifies for free lunch, or you meet other income guidelines that I don't have enough time to get into, the school must do the independent evaluation. It has no right to say no. If you do not qualify and meet certain income guidelines, the school has a right to say no. But then they have to go to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, which is the special education courtroom, so to speak, to justify that refusal. And if the Bureau of Special Education Appeals agrees, then the school has to come back and do the eval. People do not use this often enough, and experts disagree, all right? You know, somebody might in good faith decide that your child is just fine and doesn't need services. Another evaluator might have a different opinion. Ma'am?
So if I get an evaluation from the school and it doesn't have interpretation of the testing they did and it doesn't have recommendations in the summary, can I get an IEE? I can't disagree because there's no summary.
I think that, did you hear the question in the back, ladies and gentlemen? The question is if the eval is essentially incomplete, if there's no recommendation and there's no summary. I've never seen that, to be very, very honest with you. However,
I see that
if
all the
it
time.
if it happens, I think you need to send it back to the team leader in writing and say, more nicely than I'm gonna say it. Okay, this. No, I mean, come on, guys, that's ridiculous. I mean, how can you do an eval and not have a conclusion at the end? That makes no sense at all. I mean, that hurts my head. Okay, but you need to send it back and say, this is an incomplete eval, and I'd appreciate if you finish it, okay? And you come up with a conclusion, all right? If they won't do that, then it probably is appropriate to ask for an IEE, but I don't think it should go that far. An evaluation is supposed to start out with a profile of your child. Michael is 9, he's pleasant, you know, he came in, he's separated from his mother without getting really, really upset. Here are the tests that I use that are recognized in the profession. It's my professional opinion that this is an accurate summary of Michael's level of performance as opposed to he's having a bad day. Then there are a bunch of scores, and then at the end, there's a summary, and they're not gonna recommend a specific service. That's for the team. But they are gonna say, Michael has the following challenges, and he probably needs support in certain areas, and we'll talk about it more at the team. That's the best I can do with that, because I've never seen that before. Ma'am?
What if they contradict each other, the independent eval and the one the school does? And so we had this, and the school didn't know some of the tests that the independent eval did, and so they dismissed them and were like, we don't use that test, I don't really know that.
Okay, did you get that in the back? Okay, I'm gonna talk about that, because once again, the team meeting is not your final stop, okay? And where you get people who come to opposite conclusions, it's very much like if you're in your car and you put one foot on the brake and the other foot on the accelerator at the same time. Car not gonna go anywhere, all right? And it's time to move on, all right? There is no point in trying to resolve that at the team meeting level. So be patient with me, and I'm gonna get to disputes. All right, if they say the student is eligible, that's what's gonna happen. But bear in mind that they're not gonna talk to you right away about what school your child goes to. They're gonna talk first about services, all right? And there will be a separate discussion about placement, all right? This is a very, very bothersome concept because it doesn't go as far as we as attorneys for students like. A free, appropriate public education is what your child is entitled to. I cannot stand here and tell you anything intelligent about what that means, other than to say that it has to be reasonably calculated for your child to learn. And it's a very bothersome concept because the law does not say that your son or your daughter is entitled to the best possible services out there, all right? The law doesn't go that far. And you might be perfectly right that your child needs occupational therapy for an hour every day, okay? You might be right on the money, all right? That's the very best thing for your child. But the law doesn't go that far. The law says that if your child makes certain level of progress, all right, that's enough. So it is very, very important to look at an IEP, to look at the goals on the IEP, to see that they're measurable in some way. Not Michael needs to improve his handwriting, okay? But Michael needs to be able to write the letter W 7 times in a row and to stay within the lines, okay? So if at the end of the school year Michael can't do W's or he can't stay within the lines, all right, you can say he's not making progress. If the goals are the same in what's this, 2017, 2018, and 2019, and the goals aren't changing, and the progress isn't changing, that's an argument that your child isn't getting FAPE. But you've got to be tight with those goals, all right? And in many ways, you know a great deal more than the school does. You know, one mother said at a team meeting, my son is never going to be a doctor, but I would like him to be able to write his name. And the whole team lit up like this was some revelation because they said, we can teach him to do that, okay? All right, but you've got to try to be as concrete as possible. And in many ways, you know your child better than anybody in the solar system. So you've got to help a team say, this is what he needs to learn how to do, all right? And let's put it in the IEP as a benchmark, all right? Okay. Everybody's heard of LRA? Least restrictive environment. It's the least restrictive environment that is best for the child. when I was a child, all of the kids, we're not gonna talk about what year that was, are we? But when I was a child, all of the kids who had disabilities were in a separate class, all right? I later ended up in high school with one of them, you know, but that's just the idiocy, and I'll admit it, in the 1950s. I mean, they just took everybody who had a disability and they farmed them out to a separate classroom, and we don't do that anymore, all right? Now, there's some kids who, for whatever reason, behaviorally or cognitively, who cannot sit in a classroom with anybody else. But you need to be aware that that's where it's supposed to start. And the burden that your child belongs in a more restrictive environment is on the school. It's not on you to say the reverse, all right? The law entitles your son or daughter to the least restrictive environment that meets his or her educational needs. And so the discussion at the team meeting needs to be, what can you do in this classroom so that my daughter can stay here with everybody else, all right? Not, you know, we automatically ship her out to Siberia, you know, just because she's got a disability. And these are the components of the IEP. That contact information is very important, and it's usually right at the top where it says school district contact, or there's another phrase there that I'm blanking on right now. But there's one person who's the go-to person. There's the basic information about the student. There's goals. Those benchmarks are important because that's your money, okay? You want to have something concrete that's there so that you can try to measure progress. I want to look at one of the handouts that shows you the service grid. When I first started doing SPED law, I found this thing very, very complicated because there are too many little boxes. The top part of it is the services that go to the teacher. Your child doesn't have any interaction with the person who is in the top part of this section. Your child might have some assistive technology to help him or her communicate, and there might be somebody who come into the school to teach the teacher how to teach your child. But bear in mind that if it's in the top part of this, your child isn't getting the service directly. The service is going to the teacher, all right? The middle section is what goes directly to your child, and the bottom section is what goes directly to your child in a separate setting. To simplify this and to be as blunt and crude as possible, if it's not on this piece of paper, all right, it's not an entitled service, all right? And it doesn't matter what someone said in an email or in the hallway or anybody else, any place else. It has to be on the service grid. Next one. And this is just an, ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
When you say it's on the service grid, are you saying accommodations or recommendations have to be on the service grid?
I'm saying services have to be on the service grid.
So
So it's going to say,
Okay.
yes, okay, it's going to say, my daughter gets the following service, here is the person who delivers that service,
How many times?
and here is the frequency, the number of times per month or per week. Or if your child is getting extended year services, the number of times, weeks over the summer that your child gets those services. This is an extremely important document. If it's not in here, you're gonna have the devil's own time getting the school to deliver, so you need to look at this. And I wanna say this offline, I never read an IEP in one sitting, I can't do it, all right? There's too much stuff in there, okay? You know, the print is as big as an ant's navel, and there's just all kinds of stuff in there. And it's not a one session document, all right? You need to pick it up, put it down, and come back And do not let anybody tell you that you have to sign off on an IEP immediately. One of my favorite parts of this discussion is the different ways to sign an IEP, which we're gonna talk about. But I had one mother tell me she was in the shower and people came to her front door, you know, with an IEP, please sign this, you know. She dried off, but she didn't sign, all right? Nobody has a right to pressure you into signing an immediate IEP when you haven't read it through. And if it's not in the language that you use at home, I got you, ma'am. You need to say, you guys need to translate this bad boy, all right? Because it has to be in my mother tongue. Ma'am?
So I'm currently getting pressure to sign an IEP that I rejected last year and ended up in mediation, and we resolved the issue without placement. And I'm being pressured to sign the IEP before it's been amended. And the reason is that if I don't, then the default IEP from before goes back into place. Right now, we're in the process of starting the whole evaluation thing. Am I able to say I don't want to sign anything until we take a look at the evaluation?
Yes,
Yeah,
okay. Did everybody in the back get the question? Okay. Here's the thing, and I'm gonna get into this in more detail. The last agreed upon IEP is the one that controls.
So mine's in Connecticut, and they don't want anything to do with that one. So they're saying, basically they're saying in so many words, compromise and at least partially accept our IEP, or else we're gonna have no IEP in place. He's not gonna be receiving any services.
Okay, let me
But
get
like
to
we had a
that.
meeting
Let me
the
get
other
to that
day,
when
there
I
were
talk
things
about
they were
this.
supposed to amend. It wasn't amended in the new IEP, so I
Okay,
would
let
sign
me
it.
get to that in a
Okay.
later part of the presentation, because your question's really important,
Thank you.
and I think I have a couple of answers. Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry.
For the benchmark part, if you sign the IEP with no specific benchmarks, can you then go and reevaluate that? Can you put in a request to reevaluate the benchmarks so that they're more specific?
The question is, can you redo the benchmarks to make them more specific? I want to handle that in a minute too, because that's a really important question. IEP signing can be a tricky business, and I'd like to take that in lump, if I may, so that I can answer everybody's questions. Ma'am?
Can you just repeat, this is the consult that the teacher gets.
Yeah, this part up here means that somebody comes in to teach the teacher. It's not a direct consult with your child.
And
The middle part is where somebody teaches your child in the general education setting with everybody else. And the bottom section is with pullouts. And maybe we ought to jump to signing the IEP so I can answer all of those questions in one. So can I? That's the good. Let me have the next one. All right, let's skip around a little bit and keep going, please. Okay, one more. Phil, okay. Did this with my own two hands. All right. There are three ways to sign an IEP, and one of your colleagues has said, what happens if I want to redo the benchmarks? And another of your colleagues has said, I don't like this IEP, I'm waiting for evals, and the default IEP is in Connecticut, okay? The last agreed upon IEP is the IEP that controls. If it happens to be from Connecticut or Kansas or Oregon, that's the last agreed upon IEP. Wait, hold up. This is a federal law, okay? And it trumps whatever somebody says at the state level. Now, there are a couple of different ways to handle this. One way is to accept the new IEP, which says to the team, this IEP is absolutely aces and I adore it and I'm gonna sign off on it, okay? I've never seen such a wonderful IEP, all right? All right. The next category is to completely reject it, to say I can't even sit in the room with this IEP because it smells so bad, all right?
That's where I'm kind of at.
And I don't want any part of it, okay? If you do that, okay, you've got two things to consider. The first thing to consider is whether you immediately want to go to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals and duke it out over what the disagreement is. Or if, for the time being, you're comfortable with the default IEP. And when I say default IEP, I mean this is 2019. The previous IEP presumably is 2018. That's the one that controls. An IEP is a contract, guys. Like your mortgage or like your lease for your apartment or your I'm sure you all pay cash for your cars, but I have a note, okay? And I agree to pay everything, you know, that I pay every month. All right, it's a contract, all right? And if two parties sign it, it's binding, all right? And I don't want to hear that Massachusetts won't honor a Connecticut contract.
That's what they say.
All right, but once again, all right, there is a dispute resolution process. I think I have won, quote unquote, at a team meeting maybe twice in my career. It's not a courtroom, and I don't worry about it if I'm right, okay? The point is that I get the heck out of there and take it to the next level, which is what I'm going to talk about. So, to your question about benchmarks, you can sign what I very in technical legal language refer to as the slick box. And the slick box is the bottom part. Where is the handout that is for IEPs?
What's the letter?
What letter is it? Say it again? Letter? What's the letter? Do you know what letter it is? Thank you very much. Everybody help me find F. Aha, okay, here we go. At the bottom, I can send, I'm sorry, that's placement, and we don't want that. We want the one for, I'm sorry?
E.
E is service delivery. It's G, ladies and gentlemen, okay? All right, it's G, okay? I'm sorry if I'm sounding scatterbrained here. Okay, at the bottom, I accept the IEP as developed. I reject the IEP as developed, or the slick box where I have put an X. Does everybody see the X near the slick box? All right? And the slick box says, I agree with part of this IEP, but I reject the rest of it. So to your question, ma'am, I agree with certain parts of this IEP, but I would like different benchmarks, all right? I'd like them to be, I got you. I'd like them to be more specific, all right? In the parent's concern at the beginning, all right? You have a right to say whatever you want to say, as long as you say it nicely, all right? And I don't know what legal right you have to challenge benchmarks, but I think that's something that you can probably talk about at the team meeting level, or you can consider whether you want to go to the next level and go to mediation. But I'd like to talk about dispute resolution in a couple of minutes, if I may. Ma'am?
Will it be smart for me to just have his pediatrician write a specific letter to the school or whoever's running his special education, listing the benchmarks and for that to be added?
The question is whether it would be smart to have the pediatrician write some specific benchmarks, and I think it's very smart. The problem is that it's not legally binding, okay? A team meeting IEP is a recommendation by the school. That's all it is until you sign off on it. It's the school's collective opinion of what your child needs, all right? You have a right to have your own input, all right? But certain things like that you might not win, because I don't know that you have a legal right to have your benchmarks in, but you can document the fact that you want those benchmarks to be different by, first of all, using the parent input section at the beginning, and secondly, by partially accepting the IEP and then saying in writing, the benchmarks are fuzzy and they need to be more concrete for my child so that so that I can measure his or her progress. You have an absolute right to do that, and you do not have to stay on this form. as long as you attach a piece of paper to make absolutely certain that you've got your child's name and date of birth and the student ID number. I'm not telling you to write War and Peace and go on for 10 pages, but you don't have to stay in these little lines here, okay, and not say what you have to say. I like you. You laugh at all my jokes. I mean, you can go on a separate piece of paper and say these benchmarks are baloney, all right, because they're not concrete enough, okay? All right, I'd like to move on, but so can I maybe see you offline, ma'am?
So what if you don't write everything you reject on this paper? And you still want to go to the meeting and reject things, but you haven't written everything you reject? Can you still bring it up at the meeting of things you reject?
You can bring anything up at the meeting. I would not sign any IEP until you have had your say on paper, all right? Because the minute you sign, if you don't say that you're rejecting, you are implicitly accepting. And it's very, very important to make it clear that you want some of the services that are being offered, all right? If that's true, all right? But you object to the remaining services, and you take another piece of paper and you write it. But usually you're not signing an IEP at a meeting, are you? Is anybody doing that?
They give a lot of pressure now.
They give a lot of pressure in the beginning, yeah.
Okay, I'm
At the
too
end of
old
this
and
last
I'm too
meeting, They didn't want
fat.
me to leave without
Okay,
signing.
okay. I'm too old and I'm too fat, but if I were not, I would get up on this table, okay? You do not have to sign an IEP at the team meeting. And if you're telling me that they have a gun to your head, then I'm fully with you, okay? But anything short of that, I don't care what they say to you, okay? You tell them, I need to take this home, I need to read it, and I'll get back to you, and you have 30 days. Let me explain the process, and just bear with me here, okay? If you reject an IEP, the team must write to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals and say, this IEP is rejected. And you either reject it by signing that box, or you reject it by saying nothing. All right? And it's like, what do they call it? A pocket veto, okay? Once they do that, they're supposed to write, once you do that, they're supposed to write to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, and then the Bureau of Special Education Appeals will write to you and say, what do you want to do? And I'm going to get into this, if you just be patient with me, about dispute resolution, all right? But you do not have to sign an IEP at the table. The whole point of the team is to decide what the services are. So how can they have the IEP all ready for you? If they've done it, okay, if they've done it,
We're gonna add this.
They did that prior.
Why would I sign when it's not added?
They did that prior, they will put like their goals and everything else, and then they just said, okay, you agree with this, and here it is.
okay. And I'm going to tell you what my mother told me. The only person you could control is you, okay? I'm not arguing with you because they're going to do things with you that they won't do with me, and I appreciate that, all right? And I'm not discrediting what you're saying in any way. I'm just telling you, and you have my word, okay? You have my professional word that you do not have to sign an IEP on the spot, all right? You can't even read the doggone thing, all right? If they've done it properly, it's a pretty dense document. It's got all kinds of things in there. I finished law school in 1979. There are people here who weren't even born then, but I cannot read an IEP in one sitting and make an informed decision about what I want to do, all right? And I don't care what they say to you. What I care is what you say to them, okay? That you need time to take it home, all right?
And you said we have 30 days from the day it's presented.
Yeah, I think that's
Because now,
right.
this was like last week, and now I've been getting emails from the director. We need you to sign something, or else it's automatically gonna be a reject. And if you want him to have any services, you need to partially accept it.
And that's partially true, okay? The part that's true is that she's in a hurry,
Yeah.
okay? All right? That part is
And
established,
that her boss
okay?
is,
It is not true that he won't get any services if there is a signed IEP from another jurisdiction. it is the better practice, in my opinion, for you to sign the slick box, to keep her quiet and that. It is the better practice, in my opinion, for you to sign the slip box and to say, I reject this in part. So you look at the IEP and there's 7 things, okay? And you agree to 3 of them, okay? And then you sign the slick box. Does anybody object to my calling it that? I mean, you sign the box that says, I agree in part and I reject in part. And then you get a nice white sheet of paper and you write all of the other areas that you disagree with, and that preserves his right. But it is wrong for them to say that you have to sign within 30 days. That's just simply inaccurate.
The OT said the eval from his, so last year he was at a different Boston school mediation, we decided to outplace him. So last year I partially rejected the IEP in Boston, so that already canceled the Connecticut IEP, because now they've presented another one since then. So now this year, they're saying that the one I really hated last year would go into place. The Connecticut one's like gone now, even though I've been like begging for it to come back for like over a
Okay,
year now.
all right. You've got layers of IEPs, and I want to move on because I really want to make certain that I cover certain things about dispute resolution. But let me say this. This is not a fast process. I do this for a living, and IEPs are dense, they're complicated, in many instances they're very poorly written, and I've met very few parents in the years that I've been doing this that have loved an IEP, because as I've said multiple times, your child is not entitled to the very best services that are out there. That's not the law. All right? You and I would like it to be, it's not, all right? So what you have to do is work with this in the format that's available for you, all right? And in the format that's available to you, you accept something, okay? Just so your child has some services. There has to be something on there that you like. If there isn't, then we're done. Okay? And we move into the thing that I'm dying to get to, which is to talk about dispute resolution. All right? And you're going to hurt my feelings if you don't let me get there. All right? Because I want you to see that just like I can't touch this ceiling, okay, unless I stand on something, there are layers above the team meeting. Bless your heart. Okay, can we go
Forward or back?
Can we go backwards to the ones that we missed? All right. This is the same thing. This is the placement continuum. And I just want to emphasize.
You want that one?
No, I don't want that one. I want the next one, that one.
Okay.
I made this one. This is the placement continuum, and it talks about all of the categories of placement. And you start out over here in regular ed. That's the premise of where your child belongs, all right? And you note that that big bracket over the first couple of categories, all of those types of placement are in the same building, all right? An out-of-district day placement means that your child is going to a separate school entirely, and then there's residential, all right? And when you look at your placement consent form, which is F, okay? All of those placement categories are over here in the top right. And that's going to let you know what placement category the school is recommending. Then in the middle here, they usually put the name of the school. And then you've got the same kinds of boxes that you have for the IEP in general. You can accept, you can reject, or you can reject and ask for a meeting, all right? It's very important to look at this top right section of the form to see which one of these guys they have circled, all right? And there are multiple schools within each category, so they might say regular education, but there can be 50 schools in Boston that will provide regular education. You do not have a legal right to have your child in the Smith School versus the Jones School if both schools are in the same category. But hear me on this, because this is really important. If this document says that your child is in regular ed and they wanna put your child the next time round in substantially separate, that is considered a change of placement. And the school cannot do that unilaterally. You have to agree. And if you don't agree, your child can stay put.
What about coming from state to state, like my issue is, so he was integrated with peers in Connecticut, now they have him substantially separate in Boston.
In my legal opinion, if the last agreed upon IEP puts him in an integrated setting, he is entitled to stay put. What you're saying, though, is that the Connecticut IEP got superseded. And I do want to move on, but the point that I'm making is that anything they do at a team meeting, and hear me on this, it's a recommendation. That's all it is until you sign off on it. If you say no, they cannot move your child. And if they do, they're violating the law. And if there's a God in heaven and you let me get to dispute resolution, I'm going to talk to you about what you can do. All right? Once again, I frequently do not win at a team meeting. All right? But I don't care. All right? If they're violating the law, they're violating the law. And I'm going to win. All right? Not that day. All right? But that's okay, all right? A change of placement is not, I don't know the names of the Boston schools, so somebody give me two schools.
You have the Kenny School.
Murphy, Shaw.
Once again?
Murphy or the Shaw?
Murphy and,
Shaw.
okay. Murphy and Shaw, let's just pretend that they're in the same category. They're both general education schools. If your child is in Murphy and they move your child to Shaw, they don't violate a law. If your child is in a general education classroom and this top box is checked off on this placement consent form, and the next time you go to a team meeting, they check another box, that's a proposal. That's all it is. And I'm not telling you to fight. I'm not telling you to get confrontational. I am telling you to say no, if that's not what you want. And they do not have a right to do that unilaterally without your agreement. And if you walk out of there disagreeing, the only way they can win is to take you to a hearing and get a hearing officer to agree with them. And you've got to let me get to that slide, all right? All right, I'm begging, okay? All right, please, the next. We've already talked about that, and the next, and we've talked about that, and we've talked about that. Okay, and there again, if you reject, if they give you a placement and they try to change, you sign that box, all right? That says, I reject that placement. And once you have put it in writing that you reject that placement, they are not legally entitled to move your child. Your child is entitled to what is known as stay put, meaning your child gets to stay put in that placement until such time as they take you to hearing. Let me have the next one, please. There are two issues with IEPs that I run into when somebody says this IEP isn't any good because it doesn't have the services I want, or the services are already in the IEP and the school is not delivering them. If the school is not delivering services that you already, through your hard-earned negotiation and your sweat and tears, you got services put in that IEP, and the team is not delivering, this is what you do, okay? You call, this used to be called Program Quality Assurance, they've changed the name, it's called Problem Resolution System. If you call Nathan Lemon, he's likely to pick up, all right, because that's his direct line, all right? If he doesn't call you, if he doesn't pick up right then, he will call you back. And you say that you want to file a complaint for non-compliance, and you ask for an intake form. You're not deemed to have filed a complaint until such time as you complete the intake form. I urge you to write to the school at least twice and call it to their attention, all right? My son is entitled to occupational therapy. The occupational therapist broke her leg on the ski slope. He's missed 7 sessions. I want to know what you're going to do to make up those sessions. Can we please meet to discuss that? All right? I don't write any more than 2 letters to anybody. All right? My hand hurts after that. All right? So at that point, it is time to call. But they're going to ask you if you jump the gun and don't try to work it out with the school, if you at least tried to work it out with the school, all right? Always in writing. I'm not a fan of email. No phone calls, please, all right? You write a letter and you say, there's a non-delivery of service. Can we fix this? And if it doesn't happen, you go to, what is it called now? Problem resolution system. Have the next one. Okay, here we go. My colleagues changed this because I had a man climbing that ladder, but they took that off, okay? All right. Level 1 of any dialogue with a school is conversations, telephones, and the dreaded email, all right? It's informal and it's the very beginning level. The next level is a team meeting. Do you see how many levels there are above the team meeting? It doesn't end at the team meeting if you disagree, all right? I'm not telling you that what I tell you is necessarily going to work at the team meeting level. I am telling you that if you're right and you go all the way to the top, you will win. And I want to give you some statistics that I think at least are kind of interesting. If things don't go well at the team meeting, you need to consider inviting the school to mediation. Mediation is voluntary on the part of the school. They don't have to do it. But if you can get them to go to mediation, you're in front of a third party who works for the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, but who's objective, who will meet with you separately and meet with you together to try to work something out. Last fiscal year, there were 11,000 people in Massachusetts who rejected IEPs. 11,000, okay? Of those, there were 699 mediations, and 85% of them resulted in some sort of agreement. And that's important because you're dealing with a whole bunch of people who were ticked off at the team meeting level, and all they did is go one level up, and they worked it out, okay? 85% of them. That means out of, well, you know what that means. I mean, that's 85%. All they had to do is go one level up, all right? The next level, and that's why I put that dotted line there, because if mediation doesn't work, you need to consider filing a hearing request at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals. Last fiscal year, there were 481 hearing requests. I want somebody to take a shot at how many of those already had to go all the way to hearing and come out with a decision. Somebody yell out a number.
11.
13. This, I think we need a round of applause.
I like
And
potatoes.
I'm not trying to clown around here, guys, but what I am trying to say is that there are a whole lot of people who were ticked off at a team meeting, all right? And filing a hearing request is something that everyone in this room can do, all right? And the odds of it going all the way to a hearing are absolutely minuscule. We as lawyers love to litigate. I've gotten to do it twice in 18 years. Because if I win, the school has to pay attorney's fees based on my number of years out of school. And look at my hair. You know, I mean, I'm not right out of the chicken coop here, okay? And my billing rate is quite astronomical. I don't get it, but the law center gets it. And nobody wants to go to a hearing against me and lose. So if I'm right, they're going to settle. I can't tell you how many times I've written a hearing request and it just settles. So what I'm saying is that if you file a hearing request, Nobody can blow you off at that point because somebody from the Bureau of Special Education Appeals will call you. There may be 8 to 9 hearing officers, and do you think that they have the manpower or woman power to do 481 hearings? No, okay? So the pressure is on everybody to settle, all right? And if there's something knuckleheaded about not honoring an IEP that both parties have signed, or something about not coming up with decent benchmarks so that you can measure progress, these are the kinds of things that they want you to work out, okay? Because nobody has time to do 481 hearings. I want to underscore that in every single instance, the school district has a lawyer, all right? But there was one parent who went up there without a lawyer and won, okay, against a public school, and there was one more parent who went to a hearing and won against a private school. It happens. We as lawyers are highly egotistical people. We think that we can do a better job than a lay person. I mean, God knows we went to school long enough and had to do things, but you are perfectly capable of writing a hearing request and at least starting the process, and you need to remind yourself that the odds of you having to take this thing all the way to a hearing are slim to none, all right? Because most lawsuits in life, not only in special education, get resolved, all right? There just aren't enough courtrooms, there isn't enough space for every dispute to get to a courtroom. What else we got here? Discipline's kind of tricky, and I see we're running out of time. So basically what I want to say is that now in Massachusetts, if a child gets suspended, he or she is entitled to make up quizzes, work, to make some educational progress. If a child is a special ed student, the child is entitled to what's called a manifestation determination review if the child has been excluded for more than 10 days, all right? A manifestation determination review is called an MDR for short. And what it is a meeting to say, did this person violate the school rules because of his or her disability? If your child stutters and burns down the school, there's probably no nexus, all right? If, on the other hand, your child fidgets in class and is making noise and doesn't concentrate and is disrupting the classroom, and your child happens to have ADHD, you've got some argument that there might be a connection between the two. The child is supposed to get something called a functional behavioral assessment, where somebody watches your child in a classroom setting and tries to figure out what the triggers are for certain behaviors. We had an instance of a young woman who was taking her blouse off in the class all the time, all right? And that's obviously inappropriate, but she had Down syndrome, and she had figured out that that was the only time anybody would talk to her, okay? And that's why she was disrobing in the class, all right? And when somebody figured out that that's what the deal was, you know, somebody got the bright idea that maybe we should try to engage and talk with the young lady, you know, at reasonable intervals. And then she stopped taking her clothes off. There's a handout that we gave you on discipline. It is very important that if your child gets suspended, that you call the school and say, I want the homework, I want the assignments, I want what it is that my child needs to keep up. I want you to be very careful about situations where a school says, he's acting out and we can't control him, come get him, all right? If it's the school's idea that your child has to leave, that should count as an exclusion and as a suspension. And if the school won't write it up as such, you need to write your own letter and say, this is to say that on October 24th, you called me to remove my son from school because he was acting up. You want to be able to count the number of days of exclusion. I would spend more time on this, but I know I'm going to get booted out of here in 4 minutes. Can I have the next? And this is just a list, it's all in your handout, about what might count as a suspension, all right? And note that those pickups are really the harmful ones, because you're at work and you're busy and somebody says, come get your child, and you just get up and leave work and pick up your child, all right? And you want to understand that it wasn't your idea to send your child home, it was the school's. And if they're saying that he's acting out and they can't handle him, make them do their homework, all right? If they won't do their homework, do it for them, and write to document what has happened. Can I have the next? This again is some more stuff on discipline. Note the right to some education while your child is suspended. You want to bang on the table and make sure that they're writing to you in your native tongue. Next, please. And this again, this is all in your handout about the different kinds of suspension. There's long-term and there's short-term. Next, please. This meeting is important, the MDR, and I will spend 1 minute on this. You are entitled to bring anybody to the MDR to discuss whether your child's behavior is connected to the disability. You should try to get them to schedule it at a time that's convenient for you and not to be rushed into it. They are supposed to read the IEP and the evaluations and anything else that you give them to consider whether the disability and the behavior are connected. And this is an important meeting that you should try to prepare for and try to bring somebody with you who can help your argument that my son did this because of his disability, not just because he's a bad kid. All right, next one, please. And these are the questions that they're going to ask at the MDR. Did the disability cause the behavior? Did the disability and the behavior have a substantial relationship? Or did the behavior happen because the school didn't provide the IEP services? If your daughter's supposed to get counseling once a day or twice a week, and they're not doing that, so she's got nobody to talk to when she's stressed out or having a problem, that might be a question that the MDR team will consider. Slide, please. These explain a functional behavioral assessment and a behavior intervention plan. An FBA is an observation of your child by somebody who hopefully is qualified to just look at trigger behaviors and what set your child off and what caused your child to behave a certain way, and maybe come up with a behavior plan to suggest ways that the school can address those behaviors. Some children don't like to be touched, some children are sensitive to light or to sound, some kids don't like noises, some kids don't like transitioning from one subject to another. You know, I'm doing this cool picture and now you want me to do science and I don't want to do that. You know, these are things that somebody doing an FBA will look at and consider as to whether a behavior plan can be devised to address all of these things. I wish I could spend more time on this, but I know I'm running out of time and it's all in the materials we gave you. Next.
The strengths.
We're having a lot of trouble with this, and the Law Center is really focusing on restraints. First of all, restraints are not supposed to be punitive. I'm not justifying any quote-unquote objectionable behavior, but a child is not supposed to be restrained because of rudeness or disruptive behavior that doesn't hurt anybody or using inappropriate language. Restraint is used as a last resort under the regulation because your child is either hurting herself or hurting someone else. The restraint is supposed to stop as soon as your child stops engaging in the dangerous behavior, and everybody in the school is supposed to be trained on restraint law, but there's only a subset of those people who are supposed to be allowed to administer a restraint, and they're supposed to take extra training. The Department of Ed recommends 16 hours. It's only a recommendation, but the 16 hours is supposed to involve actual restraint techniques. Prone restraints are against the law unless you somehow have agreed to them, and please don't do that, all right? If your child says, I can't breathe, or I'm otherwise having a really hard time here, they're supposed to let go. You are supposed to I'll put it another way. The school is supposed to make a reasonable effort to notify you verbally within 24 hours of any restraint. Within 3 school days, they're supposed to give you a detailed written report of a restraint. Who did it, what your child was doing to warrant the restraint, what kind of restraint was used, how long the restraint lasted. If your child is coming home and telling you, the teacher laid hands on me and restrained me, you need to look at the calendar, and if you're not getting a written report within 3 days, you need to communicate with the school, all right? And if anybody wants to call me, I'll send them a copy of the restraint regulation. There's something on the law center's website that I think is pretty helpful that one of my colleagues wrote that laid it all out. And is it kick-out time?
No.
You
You
know,
can
we
do
can-
it really
you can
quick.
go to the next,
Let's
what do
go
you,
real
yeah,
quick.
go to the next one.
Let's real quick.
Okay.
Oh, this is important.
Transition rights in Massachusetts are something that somebody is entitled to at age 14. And the short description of transition services are they are supposed to start devising a curriculum to prepare your child for life after high school. You have a critical role to play here to help the transition team teach your child some of the skills that he or she is going to need. If you didn't get one of these,
They're on the back table.
all right, they're on the back table. Many of the parents I've worked with have found this helpful. It's a checklist of various skills. And you want to ask yourself, what is it that my son cannot do unless I help, all right? The transition services at school are supposed to be focused on the skills that your child is going to need when he or she is no longer eligible for special education services. That can include traveling on the T, which I could not do when I came here from Washington, D.C., and I stood in the Green Line and cried because I just had no idea what was going on. It can include spending money, counting change, telling time, basic hygiene, learning to ask for directions. I did some travel training with someone, and I said, that lady over there is carrying groceries, which means that she probably lives in this neighborhood, because she's probably not going to go to another neighborhood to shop for her groceries. So if you get lost, all right, it's a good idea to go to a mailman, or it's a good idea to go to somebody who's looks like they live in the neighborhood, and somebody on foot carrying 2 shopping bags probably lives here and can tell you what the next street is, all right? These are skills that you don't have to do all by yourself, all right? And they are a legal entitlement, but the school needs your help, all right? Because by the time your child leaves your house in the middle of January, no matter what battle you fought, you've got your kid to wear his winter coat and put his hat on and wear his boots, or you wouldn't let him out of the house, all right? The school doesn't know that he doesn't know how to do that on his own, all right? And these are the kinds of services that if you take advantage of them, all right, that they are invaluable to help somebody. We had a client who wanted a driver's license. He was on the autism spectrum. He couldn't read that book. The book is this thick. It's got all kinds of stuff in there, and he couldn't read the book, all right? But we got him hooked up with someone who, what do you call those little cars, Matchbox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got somebody to sit in a room with him with those little tiny Matchbox cars to show him the traffic pattern. He went in and aced the test, found a mistake in one of the questions, all right? And he's driving now, all right? But he learns differently. All right, he wouldn't be driving today, all right, if he had to read that book, because it's too complicated, all right? But he learns differently, and somebody sat in the library with him with those little cars and said, this is, how you drive, all right? You want to be certain that you know when the school is proposing to graduate your child. And I'm not really wild about this. In handout G, again, in print the size of an ant's navel, okay, it says the anticipated graduation date. If you disagree with that date, you want to write to the school and say, I disagree with that date, and do not agree to have a school push your child out sooner than you think he or she is ready. In Massachusetts, special education services will stop at age 22 or when a child graduates. But if you object to the graduation date, graduation is a change of placement, and the school cannot graduate your child. You do not have to agree to a proposed graduation date. The school may fight you at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, but let them do that, okay? You have a right to say, no, my child can't count, he can't read, he can't travel, he can't tell time. I cannot be sure that he knows how to dial 911, all right? He can't handle basic hygiene, you know, just basic navigation skills about walking in the street, all right? And these are the kinds of things that a good transition plan is going to address. And you have a right to say, I don't want him graduated until you teach these other schools. How am I doing?
You're doing excellent.
No, I didn't mean that.
I mean,
meant
the
to-
time was 8:35, but if you touch on the,
Okay, let's go. Oh, I'm sorry, could you go back once?
Yeah.
We have an online manual, that's at that link. It's unwieldy if you use the link, because you gotta page through a lot of things, but it's got sample letters, it explains where you go to get different evaluations, it's got videos, you can see me where I had more hair, and I'm talking about dispute resolution, there's all kinds of really cool stuff on there, and I would really strongly urge you to have a look at it. Next, please. I want to talk about your student's 18th birthday, because in Massachusetts, irrespective of the level of disability, your child is a legal emancipated adult at age 18 unless you have gone to court and got guardianship. It does not matter if your child has a cognitive delay or is nonverbal or just simply cannot take care of herself. In Massachusetts, she's a legal adult. One colleague I had said that her daughter has a severe cognitive delay. She was over 18, she was in the hospital. A nurse came in and my colleague tried to talk to the nurse, and the nurse acted like she wasn't even there, okay, because the daughter is over 18. And my colleague was not a legal guardian, and as far as the nurse is concerned, she's got to talk to the person who's over 18. Therefore, if you don't want to get guardianship in the formal sense, this is a cool form to have. All right, has anybody been notified by the school that an 18th birthday is approaching, and you want to, all right, so at least one person has, but there's a frightening silence here. So, here's what you want to think about doing. This form is a delegation of educational authority. It is not a guardianship. Your child can still do whatever else he wants to do at age 18, but this is a form that tells the school, I'm going to share in educational decision-making, all right? Because without this form, when your child turns 18, you don't get invited to team meetings anymore. You don't have a right to look at educational records, and you can't call the school and say, well, you can call, but they're not going to listen to you. You know, to call and say, I want X, Y, or Z from my son or daughter. So it's very important to think about using this form. Your child can pull it back if she gets mad at you and wants to pull somebody and wants to nominate somebody else. But this eliminates the problem of having a student who's over 18 who cannot make decisions for him or herself. And it's very important to anticipate this ahead of time, all right, so you don't get blindsided. Ma'am?
I want to add one more thing that I did learn. CBS will interact with you. your health insurance will interact with you. So just keep in mind that it's a very important thing to know. to take care of, because
I'm not sure that I could tie my own shoe when I was 18. Oh, okay, but the point is that you're looked upon as a legal adult, ma'am.
What age, like if the school doesn't send you a letter to say the 18th birthday is approaching, so what age do you have to file this or to
The question is, what age do you do this? And I would say that shortly after your child turns 18, at a team meeting, you take this and you get it done.
Oh, after they turn 18?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing before?
No, because right up until they blow out the candles, all right, you're in charge, okay? But on the 18th birthday.
Just to be prepared that.
Yes, but I think you should have this, at the ready, ma'am.
I did do that. I remember doing that for Tavis, doing the shared decision, because I know how he is cognitively. So you have to know your kid.
Yeah, I mean, not every kid.
It also entails the process of their the medical care, them traveling back and forth to school, their decision making. It entails a lot more than just that part of the general. It is emphatic to absolutely do it.
Yeah, it's important because I think you tend to forget, all right? And it's not 21 in Massachusetts, it's 18. And it's a very abrupt cutoff all of a sudden, to find that the school isn't going to talk to you, all right? And won't talk to you.
So we got 3 slides left, if we could just touch base on them.
All right, let's go. 688, when your child looks as though he or she is going to need adult services 2 years before graduation, you should go to the IEP team and discuss a referral for adult services, whether that's Mass Commission for the Blind or Mass Commission for the Deaf or Hard of Hearing. This is something that the school has to do to communicate with the adult service agencies so that the adult service agency knows that your child is in the pipeline, and they then go to the legislature and ask for money. I must underscore that adult service agencies are not legally required to give services the way special education units are. Adult service agencies are budget driven. So there are many, many services that adults need that they don't get because there just isn't money. And that's why the whole special education process and the whole transition process is so very, very important. Because if they don't have the money, they need to figure out how to get it. Once you establish that your child is entitled to certain services. Next, please. Every school has to have a bullying prevention plan. It should be on their website, and they should send it to you. They are required to investigate if your child is being bullied and reports it. They do not have to tell you exactly what went on in terms of their interaction with the bully, but they do have to tell you what they have done to stop the bullying. And if necessary, they will adjust your child's IEP. I recommend that people write to the school and ask for a meeting to have a safety plan. It might mean rescheduling and keeping kids apart from one another. It might mean counseling. It might mean bringing all the parents in. But bullying is now formally against the law in Massachusetts. There were some dreadful suicides in Western Mass a number of years ago, and the legislature just got up off it and enacted this law. It's not perfect by any means, but if you do report bullying, the school is supposed to investigate. If they don't do that, you have a basis to file a complaint. Ma'am?
Does that include incidents on a school bus as well?
I'm sorry.
Does that include incidents on a school bus as well?
Yeah, yeah. Next. So, that's what you should do. And that's the information that you should provide. Who are the bullies? When did it happen? What did they do? Be as specific as possible. And can I have the next one? I think that's it. Okay, Thanks for hanging in there with me.
Thank you so much.